Hello and welcome to the Alexandra Wenman show. It's been a while since I have recorded one of these fantastic interviews, but I'm so pleased to have with me Ms. Amy White. Amy is a vibrational sorceress. She's an intuitive medium, channel, and a truth bomb dropper. And she's also the author of Closer to Paradise, A Mother's Journey Through Crises and Healing. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's such a privilege to be here. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Me too. I'd love to tell our viewers we met through the lovely Zane at is it
Positive
positive
vibes.
vibes, positive
Yeah.
vibes, lovely Zane through positive vibes. And obviously we've done some work together, so I'm very familiar with your work, and I just think that what you do is magical and so needed on the planet right now. So I'd love to delve in straight away and just get to come to you and get you to describe to our viewers how you work and what you can help with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, yes, I'm an intuitive medium, a channel, and a truth bomb dropper. And really, all of those descriptors meld and merge into one process, but there's multiple avenues of the process. Primarily, I channel a group of energies that call themselves the greater consciousness. And the greater consciousness describes themselves as all of the wisdom that ever was, all of the wisdom that will ever be, and all of the wisdom that's here right now in this time and space in every living being. So, in essence, they're the connection to the infinite wisdom of the cosmos, but they're also the connection to the infinite wisdom that resides within each one of us. And I just love that descriptor. For me, it teeters on the resonance, but also like mind blowing, right? It's like, oh, wow, this is such a deep, deep experience when the greater consciousness comes in. And lately, what they've been sharing when I'm working one on one with clients is that it's really this connection into the soul of the client, like the inner being. And so when they channel through me their wisdom, their guidance, information that clients need to know or are ready to hear, they're
Mm.
really they're really sort of calling forth what the soul has been saying or wants to say to the client. And so, as I'm doing my channeling, as I'm doing these readings, very often the client hears words to feelings that they haven't been able to articulate, or it opens the possibilities for other ways of looking at experiences in this human form. And the thing that they are so bold and direct about is that we're all here to bridge the human experience and the soul experience in the same moment. It's not about transcending one to the other, right? We've all chosen to be on this planet at this time to learn how to be human. We've got the soul thing down. That's not a problem. But and it's not, none of it's a problem. But the challenge or the magic here is, how do we balance both, and not balance like in a steadfast, unmovable way, but balance in the way of continuing to ebb and flow between the two so that we are coming into wholeness with ourselves. So when I'm in a session with a client, or even in a large audience setting, the intention there is to call forward what we already know so that we can take it, ingest it, digest it, and then put it into practice where it feels resonant to us, each one of us.
I love that. You're so hitting home where I'm at as well. And I love this because we are multidimensional, aren't we? It's not a linear journey, it's not a linear process, and it really is bringing all these extra facets of ourselves, of our awareness of who we are, and bridging it into the daily life, the daily human life. This is one of the things I love about you, is how grounded you are in all of it and how practical you are. So I know that obviously, as healers as well, and we have a lot of healers that watch this show. So how do you take that beautiful work that you do and kind of bring it into your practical business life, everything? How did you find that a challenge at first?
Actually, no, it's been this beautiful co creation for me. Because just as when I'm working with clients, when I work with the greater consciousness energy and my guides and my angels and all, they're saying the same thing to me, right? So it's not just do as the greater consciousness says, but it's also like walking the walk and talking the talk. I tell my clients all the time, first and foremost, I am human. And so even as I'm channeling the greater consciousness, I'm channeling it through my human filters. So, and I'm so aware of that. And for me, there's this practice of really asking my ego mind, thinking mind to not leave the room, but to step aside so that I can be the cleanest, clearest channel for the information that comes through for myself as well. And so it's really beautiful how it's not in contradiction. As I'm sharing with my clients, there's always something there for me. And as I'm working with the greater consciousness and, as I said, all of my support system, I'm getting information that's just giving me step by step sort of navigation, like GPS, to help me navigate my personal journey as well.
I love it. It's always so interconnected, isn't it? It's like as you heal, you receive, and it's when you're a channel, it just works in that
Yeah.
beautiful symbiosis, doesn't it? I
Yeah.
love what I love talking to other channels about as well is the journey, like how this all happened for you. Can we go back to when this all started for you? Because I love the crazy journeys and I love the getting to grips with it.
Yeah. And to say that my journey was not linear is an understatement for sure.
I love it.
I often get asked this question of when was the first time that I realized that I was an intuitive? And honestly, I can't pinpoint a time because I feel as though I came into the world, at birth, wide open. And it was more the shutting down that happened over time. Like my earliest memories in my family of origin wasn't, oh, you're intuitive. It was, you can't connect to God through any way but the church. And if you do, you're inviting bad onto the family. And I mean, this was at a very, very young age. So I can only imagine, 4 or 5, 6 years old, walking around the planet wide open, saying things that were probably startling to my family and not realizing that there was anything wrong with it. But then through conditioning and training and fear, really, I shut it down for a very long time. And so even though as I was going through my teen years and early 20s, I knew that there was something, I always said that I had a really good instinct. I had gut sense, I had street smarts, and that translated into business. So went to college, went into corporate, got a job in that space. And I was really successful because I was like, oh, I've got this good corporate street savvy, but never really attributing it to anything more than, my ego saying, oh, you're really good at this. And it wasn't until my late 20s when I had gone through a divorce, I had 2 small kids at home, and I felt like my life was completely off the rails. Like just I didn't know how I was juggling all of those flaming chainsaws every day and being good to myself or being good for my kids or being good for my work. And I laid in bed one night and I just called out to any being that might hear me, how do I get back on track? And what I heard loud and clear was, you need to learn to love yourself. And that was it. That was, I mean, and boy, did it bring up resistance in me. But it was also that invitation to start to explore, what does this mean? Beyond bubble baths and days off and, getaway weekends, it was, what does it mean to really learn to love myself? And that was the key that opened the door for this exploration that unfolded over years and years and years. And part of it was my fear of not wanting to come up, to that place where I had been taught it was bad. And then knowing that my soul was like pulling me forward to say, baby, there's more here. And so it really just became this, step by step unfolding. Towards the end of my corporate career, I started doing coaching. I found that brought me so much passion and it really filled my well the way the corporate work wasn't anymore. And that's when I started to realize that I knew things about my clients that I didn't know how I knew, but I knew them. And I used that information to help guide the coaching, but I never shared any of it, with my clients because it was just too far it was just too far of a stretch for me, even as I was exploring and starting to work with people to explore my intuition and connecting deeper into that inner knowing. Um, and then things in my corporate career just really imploded, and I realized that was not the place for me anymore. So in 2014, I quit my job with no job, no safety net, but a real strong calling from spirit that said, just follow this path and it will all unfold. And it did. Within 6 months, I had launched a coaching business. I had moved from the East Coast of the US to the West Coast of the US, and my calendar was full. And I couldn't even believe it in, my human sense of like, how did this happen so quickly? It was like a
You're
fire
being picked
hose.
up and plucked and just
I
moved.
know. It was like a fire hose on my back, just like pushing me almost to the point where I couldn't breathe, right? It just was that kind of flow and that kind of energy. But even in that practice, I was still not being, I don't want to say authentic, maybe isn't the right word, but I wasn't being open about the intuition part of it. And then one day I was meeting with a long-term client, and I happened to just mention that I had pulled tarot cards before the session. And so she said, well, tell me what the reading was. So I did a little mini reading. And at the end, she said the most powerful words that changed the trajectory of my experience. She said, why aren't you doing this work? And it was like a gut punch. And at the same time, this deep, deep knowing that I was really being called to do something that felt a little uncomfortable to me and yet felt so soul driven. And so that was it. And then I just really started to embrace and publicly, share that this is the work I was doing. And at that same time, I was sort of leaving the tarot piece behind, and the channeling piece was becoming more and more strongly in tune with me. And I love, I just think that it's so beautiful the way that spirit works with me, because they knew that I couldn't just rip the band-aid off. They had to really give me a little bit, so that I could ingest it and embrace it, and then stand in that truth of who I was, and then the next truth of who I am, and then the next truth of who I am.
I love it. I love the way that you talk about your channeling work too. It's often not what it seems, is it? People hear the word medium, or they hear the word psychic, and they have this idea that it's fortune telling or future reading, and that's all there is to it. But there's so much more depth to it, and especially the work that you do than that. It really is a soul-led approach, and I love that. And I love the way that you might put this into words better than me, but I think that because you're so able to open that channel and let the soul lead, it's almost like you bridge people into allowing their soul to lead. Is that how you might describe it?
Exactly. And that's really what the greater consciousness has been sort of clarifying for me, without calling it a soul reading, because that's not really what it is. It's allowing the voice of the soul of the client, of the inner wisdom of the client, to come through in a way that they can hear, and what I really love, and the greater consciousness says this all the time, is that, we're having this conversation right now because you're ready to hear it. So that's the other piece that's really powerful, is that what comes through the greater consciousness when I'm in session is about that time and space that the client can really hear and resonate with the information. Like they couldn't have heard it a minute before. And that's the beauty of it. And it is really their soul's wisdom just being sort of bolstered by the infinite wisdom, right? This higher consciousness sort of helping me to put in words what others can't hear for themselves. And there's no judgment there, right? We're all in this space, like I said at the beginning, this balancing of the human and soul. And a lot of times our stories and our patterns and the conditioning that we've had through our life experience keep us from being able to hear or trust that the information that we're sensing is accurate. Because a lot of times the greater consciousness is really helping to validate what those that I'm working with already know, or they've already been considering but they didn't trust it enough in the moment to act on it. And now it's this permission, for lack of a better way to say it, for them to take that next step.
It's stunning. If I want to describe, I'm sort of being compelled to describe a little bit about what I experienced when you gave me a session, because it's interesting being on the other side, being on the other side, but it was almost like, as the words came through you, and I find this with channeling also, it's not just the words, is it? It's a whole energy shift, alchemy going on. But I almost felt like this infusion of truth. So even though you call yourself truth bomb dropper, it's not, it's direct, but it's kind of like this infusion. So you feel simultaneously held and safe. And then this almost infusion of truth comes in, and it goes in and under. I kind of see, like, if I could describe it energetically, it sort of goes in and underneath all the programming and all the carefully constructed protections that people have in place, or that the ego has in place. It sort of seeps in like groundwater, goes down through those rocks that we've built up around us. And then it kind of seeps up and sieves up to the surface, the bits that we need to look at. But it's such a beautiful kind of osmosis type fluid energy that you work with. It comes in and then it gently lifts it up, brings it up to the level of the consciousness where the defenses are no longer in the way. And then suddenly the truth is there, but you feel so safe in it. And like, I had to describe it that way because I feel that every channel is different. Every channel is unique. And that's very different, I think, to the energetics of, say, when I channel or when another channel channels. I've never felt anything quite like it. That infusion of that consciousness was so safe, but also very confronting. I have to be honest, like that truth aspect that you bring, it's absolutely incredible, because some of it was like, oh yeah, wow, she's really seeing me. She's really seeing me. Wow, I thought I had that well hidden. And the ego kind of goes, what? But then you're at the same time going, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
It's safe here. We can look at this. I love it. I just love it.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. And I think that it's, part and parcel, because it really is already within us,
Yes.
and so it's just accessing that information in a way that feels safe. Like it's hard for us to do that when we have to cut through all of the constructs and all of the stories and belief patterning to get to that truth.
Yes.
But when we can tune right into that soul knowing, that's where it can bubble up, like you said so beautifully, to the surface. And one of the things that the Greater Consciousness says often during readings is be aware of where you sense resistance, because resistance is the indicator that there's truth below, and so it's not a judgment. There's nothing that you even have to fix when you come up to that resistance, but just to have that awareness and acknowledgement, like, oh, there's something here for me. I might not be ready to look at it now, but once you kind of have that awareness of it, you can't go back to not having awareness of it. So eventually, your soul's going to knock a little louder. You're going to co-create experiences that keep bubbling it up until you are ready to look at it. And none of it's wrong, right? Whether we choose to do it now or choose to do it later, we're going to do it. We're going to look at these things because it's part of why we're here, to break those cycles and patterns and really come. I love how the Greater Consciousness says this. We're here to come home to the capital T truth of who we are, like the truth of who we are.
No lying to ourselves even,
Oh, well, that's it. That's it. And I love that idea that we have all of us. It doesn't matter what kind of healer we are, or if we're a healer or not, or if we're on the path of awakening or transformation. We all have, because we're in this human experience, constructed beautifully these facades, these outward facing, what we want people to see. And at some point, when we're not in alignment with what we're showing to the world and what's coming from the inside, that's where the recalibration can happen. And resistance is a great entry into that.
I love it, leaning into it. It's just, I say to people, get really comfortable in your discomfort. If you can get comfortable, in being uncomfortable, in those uncomfortable emotions. If we talk in terms of emotions, because every human being has the emotions and are sentient, if you can lean into those and kind of buddy up to them a bit, cuddle up to them and just sit in them, let them percolate, love yourself in it. It's like amazing. You can't be manipulated then either. You can't, because, but if we're not willing to do that, or if we're in resistance of being in that, or owning that, or getting comfortable in that, somewhere it's going to come in our outer life and really trip us up, and it could be harsher. I'd rather do it in an MOT with you,
Yeah.
and have that lovely infusion than have it come and slap me in my daily life somehow.
Yeah, yeah, and that, the thing that I feel so strongly about is that we often deem emotions bad or good, right? And these good emotions are the kind of the thing that we long for, that we aim for, that we work towards. But the emotions that we deem bad or negative are really an indicator. Again, I love these indicators because there's all these avenues then to do our own inquiry. But what I've heard recently, and it resonates so deeply, is that when we have discomfort, it really is this indicator that our thinking mind, the stories, the beliefs, the patterns, the constructs, and our heart mind, our soul, our inner wisdom, just isn't in alignment, because our soul doesn't feel that discomfort. Our soul doesn't look at situations with judgment. And so if we're judging, and if we're, beating ourselves up, then we're not in line with our soul. And when we can come into contact with that discomfort, as you said, and I love that, really to be in it, to not try to push away, make it go away, or be in resistance to it, because what we resist persists. But to say, oh, this is a beautiful invitation for me to do an exploration into where, what my soul wants me to know, and how these two things are not quite matching up.
That's that state of grace, isn't it? That
Yeah.
acceptance. If you can stop judging yourself, that's the point of real pivotal change, I think, when we can let go of that self-judgment.
Yeah,
And
or
you've had
even
it.
to be, oh, sorry.
Sorry, carry on, honey.
Yeah, I was going to say, or even to just be an awareness of the judgment.
Yeah.
Very often, and it's just what we do, right? We see it and then we want to fix it. But sometimes it's really just saying, oh, there's that judgment voice again. Let me check in. Is what I'm hearing from this judgment voice really my truth?
Mm,
Hmm. And can I be really sure it's my truth? It's like Byron Katie's work, right? Can
yeah.
I be absolutely certain that what I'm sort of hearing in my thinking mind is the truth of the situation? And I think just by asking the question and not doing any action at that point, it really helps to open up that grace and space for us to explore. Oh, if this isn't really my truth, what is? And I just love that invitation so much.
I do that a lot. I have a little saying, and it's I don't know until I know. And we often feel, because everything in life is a series of choices, and we often feel very pressured to make a choice. Do I stay or do I go? Do I act or do I not act? Well, I think if there's ever a question mark over something, until I know, until it's very clear, whether it's coming from intuition or channeling or guidance or a gut feeling, or whether it's coming from external events or situations, you don't have to leap, you don't have to act until you know, because often people are living in reaction. And I wrote a poem this morning because it really landed with me. When you know something logically, and you've been doing loads of healing on it, you've been working your way through the motions, you've done all the background work, you've been up the healing spiral with it, and then suddenly at a certain point you just have to be in it, you just have to
Yeah.
let it be there. And I was thinking about how many empaths, and I was having conversations with two friends of mine who are real empaths as well on the weekend. And we all agreed that we've grown up with this, living our lives, or our core personality being formed in reaction rather than in action. So every relationship that we have, it's almost like, would dictate whether I was happy or sad. In my family, whether or not my mother was happy or sad became the reaction. And it almost feels like you're this little leaf being buffeted in the wind, because everybody else's emotions are important, because it's directly impacting you. Therefore, your job is to people please, to make sure everyone else is comfortable so that you can be comfortable. And it was amazing, like I've never really given it words before. It's been a long process, but this morning it went beyond. It went way beyond needing to know, way beyond ego, way beyond logic, and it just became embodied. It just suddenly something clicked, switched, and I came back into my center. And this is the thing, isn't it? Keep coming back to yourself, keep coming back to your soul. But it
And
was
I
so
love
amazing
that.
to have words for it finally.
Yeah, it's magic, it's sacred. And one of the things that's really, I think, pivotal is that there's a collective energy right now of this calling out for this knowing, right? And so what it's like the timing of you finding the words and it settling into you is important, because it is something that I think there's a majority of people who are on the path right now that really need to understand that. I woke up the other morning to the words, don't intellectualize trauma. And I thought, oh, when we think about healing, and how you just described it is so beautiful. We've done the work, we've done the digging, we've excavated, but at some points we need to be aware of, because our thinking mind is so powerful and it means so well. I really believe that. But it allows us to go, oh, I've got that. I can intellectualize the healing. I can intellectualize the trauma. It wasn't as bad as maybe I thought it was when I was a child, or, and we can replace trauma with any word, right? Don't intellectualize your relationships, or don't intellectualize, your path. But I think it's important to be aware that, at some point when things get really uncomfortable, our set point, many of us, is to go into the intellectualizing of it. And then we postpone that sitting in the discomfort, because we have a way of convincing ourselves that we got it. I love this. I heard this one time, and I just think it's great that we get to a point where we're like, okay, God, source, love, Fred, whatever we call it, right? I've got it from here. And I can see in my life the many times that I've felt that way, but convincing myself that it was like soul led, like, okay, it's your turn to take over, but it's really never, right? It's because it's such a co-creative experience. We're being asked to co-create with our soul, with our inner being, with our inner knowing. And as soon as we put that hand up and be like, okay, soul, I got it from here, we've kind of stepped off that, that trajectory just a little bit.
Yeah, it's really it's always the merging, isn't it? The melding, the integration, the allowing, the acceptance. I love it. And you've had plenty of experience of this, obviously, and I want to come to your book. It's Closer to Paradise, right? Can you tell us about the journey of the book?
Yes. So Closer to Paradise, A Mother's Journey Through Crisis and Healing, is a memoir of my time supporting my teenage son through a mental health crisis. And the reason that I wrote the book was that as my son slipped very unexpectedly into this 2-year journey that we went on through hospitalizations and suicide attempts and in inpatient care and residential care, and what I found through the journey really was this deep awakening for me. And that also, in the space of mental health, and especially when there are parents or primary caregivers of children having mental health experiences, there's not a lot of support. People aren't talking about it. And so I felt very strongly that as I learned to advocate for myself and advocate for my son, I wanted to bring voice to something that I felt very strongly needed a voice. And so before the book, I actually started a blog in the early months of my son's crisis, just to document my experience and hoping to share with others who might be going through the same thing. You're not alone. And it was very interesting because within just a couple of months, I had 30 countries reading this blog, and I was being invited to speak on national radio and TV and podcasts about the journey. So even as I was in the middle of it, I was already sort of expanding the experience for my purpose. And even though the book tells my journey and my son's journey, it really is about what I learned about myself, how I learned to be in integrity with my needs and my understanding of what was happening, and also to talk about things that may make people uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I think the tide from the book to the work I'm doing today is that by being able to speak truth that may make people uncomfortable, it allowed me to be more open with my intuitive work and the mediumship work that I do and the truth bomb dropping that I do, because it gave me the awareness that it's more about honoring myself and my journey than it is about how the information is received.
I love that. So many people are afraid of sharing their truth for the fear of how it's going to be received, aren't they? But it's so
Yeah.
necessary right now in light of what's going on our planet at the moment, that we not only that we share our truth, but that we hear others' truth, that we learn to listen to each other and
Yeah.
receive. Because we, I think especially with trauma work, like you were saying, the logic, a lot of people think they've got the right remedy for trauma or the right way to deal with it and heal it. And I've got a dear friend who's an amazing trauma therapist, and often it isn't what you think. Sometimes you can push people further into trauma by trying to help them, and you can create band-aid solutions where actually they don't need that. Sometimes they just need acknowledgement. They don't need you to
Yeah.
fix them. It's very interesting. And I think the more that we learn to listen, the more that we're going to learn, and the more that we're going to open, and the more that we're going to be able to meet each other as a humanity and as a society. And that's all factions, right? All levels, all
Yeah.
genders, all colors, all races,
Yeah,
all
and
ages.
I love what you're talking about it as far as truth, right? And it's knowing that we have our truth and knowing that others have their truth, and also understanding that your truth and my truth may not be the same, but it's still our truth.
Yeah.
We can't know anyone else's journey. And we are spending a lot of time as a collective looking about the planet and saying, okay, you're in my camp because you have the same truth as me, and you're not in my camp because you don't have the same truth as me. But the thing that the greater consciousness has been really emphasizing lately is whether it looks like it outwardly based on our judgment, everyone is really doing the best they can from where they are, and
Mm.
that they are honoring their truth in the moment. And
Mm.
whether we deem it good, bad, whether we judge it as being, you know, uh, 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 argumentative or inflammatory or it really is when we can come into that space of not only our truth and not mattering how our truth is received, but also being open and giving grace and space to receiving other people's truth, even if it's not our own. And it's
We're
really
really,
powerful.
really powerful. We're really in the grit of
No.
being human at the
Oh my
moment. And
gosh,
this is, I
we
was having
are.
a conversation with a fellow healer the other day, and we were talking about how, even as healers, right? Even as the awakened ones, the ones that are on the, oh, we know this stuff, right? Oh, we're being really asked to just be human, really lean into our humanness. At the end of the day, we're all going to pass over at some point. We all have emotions. We're all being asked to face what's going on here in our humanness, and we can't run away from our humanity. And I know that firsthand what it's like to run off with the fairies, Airy Libra, and
Yes,
escapism, darling, is my middle name.
yes, I
It
get
can't
it.
avoid it anymore. No one can avoid this, what's going on this plane of reality.
Well, and I think there's a big misconception for people who do this type of work that somehow we've got this view into all of our blind spots. But, that's not true, because, and it wouldn't work for us in that way in this life experience. Maybe in others it would, but in this life experience where so many of us are here to learn how to be human, if all of our blind spots were exposed and we could just be like, boop, boop, dippity, lippity, dippity do, whatever the magic wand, magic spell is. But we're here to also uncover our blind spots as we're doing this work. And I think that it's really fascinating. People get surprised when I say, oh yeah, I just came head to head with some big truths that I was not even aware were under the surface until like everything imploded. And it's like, yeah, that happens to all of us. We're all here for that,
I love
and
it.
we
You love
all
it when
have blind
another
spots.
dark night of the soul hits you and you think, I've done this, universe. I've been here.
Oh, I know. It's, and I think for me, having 5 planets in Scorpio, it's kind of my life path. It's like, go into the underworld, dredge it up, see what's there, and then come back up, but not just for my own healing, for my own evolution, but then I can really walk that talk with others and say, I'm not just sharing this wisdom for you, but I also can understand it because I've walked that walk, or I'm walking that walk right now. That was why that book was so important. I was walking the walk and I was sharing what I was experiencing in the moments that I was experiencing it for the purpose of saying, I'm not um, somehow, I don't have a get out of jail free card here. This is part of my evolutionary experience and how what I wanted to learn when I came in here to this life. And so I think it's really important to understand that there's no one on this planet that's here right now that's somehow getting off without experiencing this deep dredging. The greater consciousness says all the time, when you're at the bottom of the ocean, right? When you feel like you're just drowning in it, what's at the bottom? It's sand and dirt, and what's underneath that's often where the treasure is. And so when we can kind of come into that place of like, oh, sugar, here I am again, and
Sugar.
sugar, there's more dealing, there's more things that I can be exploring, and likely there's more treasure I can excavate when I'm allowing myself to sit here and be here in the muck.
Absolutely. And sometimes when we're right at the bottom of that muck is where we find the comfort. We pop through, don't we? We feel held and we find our footing again. And we go, oh, I let myself go there. Just let myself go and release.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we can just, yeah.
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong. We're not doing anything wrong. Every single path, every single decision, every single experience, no matter how we deem it in the ego thinking mind sense and the judgment sense, everything is perfectly divinely orchestrated. And, when we can come into contact with that and allow it to be truth, and maybe it's not going to happen all the time, but when we can really come into contact with that knowing, it gives us grace and space to allow for the transformation that we're being invited into, that we're in the middle of, right now, to move forward at a pace that allows for us to really be in it, as you said, like really be with it.
And being it's being really getting used to the unknown, isn't it? Really is settling into the unknown, letting the unfoldment occur. But speaking of the unknown,
Yes.
I'm gonna talk about, well, it's not necessarily what we know, but I'd love to get your insights on the bigger picture of kind of how you feel things are unfolding on this planet right now. What's going on, Amy?
Oh gosh, well, I love that. I love that question. Thank you so much. What's really interesting, and this is something that the greater consciousness has been speaking about for a few weeks now, is that the energy on the planet right now, there was a collective shift that happened over the last several weeks. And the shift was one of letting go, but letting go in a way that, for a large majority of the collective, this realization that we've been hanging on to this false sense of control, that we've been trying to hold it all together, right through pandemic and COVID and all of the information swirling around outside of us. And it's almost like, and it feels like as I tune into it, like all at once, everybody just went, blah, and free fall. And so both beautiful because it's a surrender of the surrender of what we thought was, but it's also this realization, and this is the energy right now of this collective realization of like, oh my God, if I'm not this, if this wasn't my real reality, what is? And so, and I love this description, the greater consciousness calls it like we're in the bardoest of bardos, right? We are in the space in between what was and what is forming around us. And this free fall is uncomfortable for everyone. But because it's happening at such a big energetic level that none of us are not feeling that energy. And so it does feel, I think, for many of us, like this time of real uncertainty and this time of awaiting further instructions.
Definitely.
The greater consciousness is like, there is nothing to do. There is no action to take right now. Now, that doesn't mean we can't be inspired to do step by step by step, but there isn't this sitting down and big plan of what is coming and how we're transforming. There is this trust and this faith element right now for those of us who can tap into that says, okay, I don't have any idea. And I know that I'm being held. And I know that there's a greater unfolding here that maybe is just happening under the surface. Like I don't even see the little sprout coming up through the ground, but it is happening. And when we can lean into that knowing, and as best as we can, and it's not about perfection, leaning into that trust that there is a bigger picture here, that actually helps us one by one, as we lean into that, we're bolstering the rest of the collective. This really is both such a personal experience, but it's not only personal. And it almost feels, the greater consciousness used the term reverse engineering last night during my community call, because they're like, instead of it coming from the individual, it's actually coming from the collective into the individual. A little bit of a different energetic way that we're experienced this element or this aspect of transformation.
I love that. And it's, well, as without, so within, and it's flipped, hasn't it? The way I'm experiencing it, it was like suddenly the glamour came off and the truth is there, but it's almost like, but it's not time to act on that truth yet. It's weird. It's almost like, whoa, and looking at every aspect on an individual level, looking at every aspect of the life that I've created for myself and going, whoa, it's time for a switch up again, man. This has all got to change, like suddenly. And then the guidance has all been, no, wait, just sit in it, sit in what you've created for yourself, really look back over how you've allowed this to happen, or why you've created things that maybe you're not happy with, or maybe aren't serving you. And wait further instruction, exactly what you said. And then I do the same. I kind of see it on an individual level and then zoom out and see it on a global level that way, kind of go, whoa, how does this tap into what's happening on the whole planet? And we're pioneers. We don't have any reference points. A time like this has never happened for humanity before. So we're like,
exactly.
I'm like, grab the trees, hold on to the trees, and that's all you can do is be in nature, really, while this unfolds.
And during my channeling yesterday, I was asking the greater consciousness, like, help me with the words to describe this transformation. And they said, there are so many words, but we can't comprehend it just yet. There is some unfolding that's still happening before the words come resonant for us. And so what they were saying is we could give you words to describe this, but it won't land because we don't have that deeper understanding of this yet. So we are really in this bardo, right? The space between time. And I just want to honor for myself and everyone who's listening and beyond, it is very uncomfortable to be in that space in between. That is the truest form of discomfort in my experience of like, okay, how do you even intellectualize it? Well, you can't, which is part of the program, right? Part of the deprogramming of this set point of intellectualizing so much of what happens in our lives.
It's like I love just being the observer, the observer, letting yourself feel it, letting yourself kind of sit back in it and observe, just observe. And that non-judgment is so key. And that, I kind of feel, as you were talking, I was seeing you and your energy as being like this magnifying glass into that truth. You know, it's like you kind of, as you perceive it and as you describe it, it's opening a window into it for others, and that allows this ripple effect to go out. And it also gives, I think, the more conversations we have like this, people like us have like this, it's saying to people, you know, it's okay. It's totally okay not to know. It's totally okay not to have it all sorted, because nobody does. Nobody does. Not even the biggest experts, not even the people that top the 100 most spiritual people lists, who generally, I love those lists, because it's like, what's the point? Is that really the point? But, you know, nobody has it sorted right now. And it's
we're
okay.
not supposed to. We're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we were supposed to have it all sorted, we would have stayed in non-physical.
Yeah.
You know, it's not what this is about. You know, we really are here for this exploration and excavation and expansion.
But it's
And we're
so
in it.
exciting. On the flip side, it's so exciting because we don't know what we're capable of. We're just only at the start of really understanding what we're capable of. And it's so, it's, I keep pinching myself and going, this is really supernatural, guys. Like, I am used to the supernatural, but this is supernatural on another level. I love it. I love it.
Oh, that's such a great, like mic drop.
Bang. Well, I would love for you to share how people can work with you and how they can get in touch with you and find out more about you, because now is the time.
Yeah, thank you. So all of the things, as they say, are on my website. So it's amywhite.co. And on there, it shares what my services are, my offerings. I have free video segments. I have replays of open channel calls that I've done during the pandemic. It's really the go-to place. It tells a little bit more about my story. I'm also on the socials. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook and YouTube, and all my links are there. But go to my website, you know, take a look around, explore, and reach out if you have questions. I'm you know, usually pretty good about answering emails in a timely-ish fashion. I get a lot of them, but that's a great way to contact me. And you can even set up a 30-minute discovery call if you want to learn more about the work and the process and what it would be like to go into a session with me.
Perfect. Amy, I love you, dear sister. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I love it. And I really recommend sessions with Amy. She's really amazing. Yes, the truth is there, but you're held in it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Any final words before we sign off?
You know, the thing that the greater consciousness has been saying and wants me to repeat here is just to be in as much compassion for yourselves as you can be right now, and create the space and the grace, you know, and the non-judgment to allow these next months, years, whatever it looks like, to unfold. The more grace and space we give ourselves, the easier, the more flow we will have, no matter what it looks like on the outward. Because when we come into that truth of who we are, it shores us up to ride the waves instead of being battered by them.
Beautiful. Oh, I love it. Thank you, Amy, so much for talking to me today. Yes, let's just all take a deep breath and see what unfolds. Absolutely gorgeous. And thank you to everybody who has tuned in for this episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. I'm going to pop all the links to Amy's website and everything below so that you can go and check her out, and be gentle with yourselves. And until next time, so much love and see you soon.